We're going to cover a lot here. We're going to be going through the quarterbacks that were injured and what it means for their pass catchers. And we're also going to be looking at some running backs where their backfield is going in the completely wrong direction. And honestly, there are a few names that we can go ahead and look to cut. Now, I first want to talk about Jefferson, Addison, and TJ Hawkinson a little more in depth, ladies and gentlemen. We covered them a little bit in the video on Sunday night, but the main storyline that we are going to have for this week is Kirk Cousins going down with the torn Achilles, and now us having God knows who at quarterback in Minnesota. There's a lot of speculation. Regardless, all we have to say is it will be a significant downgrade from whom we had with Kirk Cousins. And I want to say a couple different things with this front in terms of them replacing Cousins. If it was going to be so easy to just go out there and trade for a viable quarterback that would actually maybe move the needle and keep you in the mix, don't we think the Jets would have already done this? The Jets who are 4-3, the Jets who are primed for the Super Bowl run this year, wouldn't they have made the move for the quarterback if there was one that was sitting out there and he was going to be fine the second Rodgers went down? Nope, they're still playing a bottom three quarterback in the NFL, trying their best to win football games because they know that there are no solid options out there. The second thing is, if the Jets aren't willing to make that move, why would the 4-4 Minnesota Vikings do so? I know it's tough. They've won 3 games straight. They're on the... I don't know what you want to say here. Ultimately, this is a team that probably didn't have Super Bowl aspirations in the first place. And now I think that it's probably about time to shut it down. Now, we'll talk about what that means for Jefferson in just 1 second, coming back from his injury. But I want to put a baseline on how good Kirk Cousins is for fantasy football purposes. Because you can sit here and you can debate if Cousins is a bad quarterback, an average quarterback, a good quarterback. I'm not sitting here debating that. I only care about the numbers. I only care about fantasy, aka fake football. And their Cousins is phenomenal for pass catchers. Week in, week out, is going to be a top 5 to 10 quarterback in passing yards. Season in and season out, he is going to be giving you minimum 4,000 passing yards every year. You look at 2023, the only quarterbacks with more passing yards were Josh Allen and Tua. 2022, the only quarterbacks with more passing yards were Mahomes, Brady, and Herbert. 2021, he is top 10 with 4,200 passing yards. In 2020, he is top 10 with 4,200 passing yards. And like we said, it's like clockwork. He will be right there at the very top of the NFL in passing. And typically, this means, we know the wide receiver 1 for Cousins is going to be good in fantasy. We know that there's going to be a lot of passing volume to go around. Why I actually was aggressively drafting these guys like TJ Hawkinson in the middle rounds is because I thought there was that outside chance the Vikings were going to lead the NFL in pass attempts. Now that changes. I think that we can assume that this is going to be a bottom 5 to 10 offense in the NFL, even with these great weapons. And I think backing up that assumption is the fact that if we go and look at Las Vegas sportsbooks right now, they have the Atlanta Falcons of all teams as 4-point favorites over the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm going to be moving Jordan Addison down from being that low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 with a healthy Kirk Cousins to being a low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 with no Cousins. And that's before we get Jefferson back in. I'm going to be moving TJ Hawkinson down for my tight end 3 in fantasy. I think that he has to fall behind Sam Laporta. I think that he possibly falls behind Evan Ingram, possibly falls behind George Kittle. I think that TJ Hawkinson may fall down from about tight end 3 to about tight end 7 to 8. And then when it comes to Jefferson, I don't want to say this with certainty. Obviously, we are just speculating. It's like 1 a.m. Sunday night right now. Please excuse me. But nonetheless, I think that this means that Jefferson has no incentive to rush himself back. Obviously, this is a player that needs that big-time contract. This is a player that deserves every dollar of that big-time contract. And now to rush himself back to possibly risk further injury on a team that's playing for nothing, I just don't see the reason for it. So yeah, you should be very worried about this Minnesota Vikings offense, and I don't have good news for you there. Now, going over to the New York Giants, this team is just in a free fall. To put a baseline on how bad this team is, you have next week, the Raiders being anywhere from 3.5 to 5.5 point favorites over the Giants, depending on the sports books that you are looking at. If you were looking at the Giants, Las Vegas sportsbooks are now telling us that this will project out to be a bottom 3 to 5 team rest of season in total wins. And we saw this week 7 total passing yards for the Giants. Even if Daniel Jones is coming back soon, I don't know how it gets better. You have Darren Waller going down with a hamstring. And now Waller falls into a similar bucket to Justin Jefferson, right? Where now you're dealing with an injury for Darren Waller that has been lingering. And now he is playing on a team that has nothing to play for. The only difference is Waller's not elite in the first place. He's not Justin Jefferson. Waller's not 24 years old. Now, Waller has a history of these injuries. So I think in the case of Darren Waller, he has no incentive at all to rush himself back. I'm assuming you get no Waller for a while. And I drafted a lot of Saquon Barkley this year. And if I knew the Giants offense was going to be this bad, I probably wouldn't have done it. In reality, projecting Saquon Barkley going forward, this will still be a running back that we have to play every single week. He almost had 40 touches this week. He had 36 carries. He had 3 receptions as well. He had 5 targets out of the backfield, so he had 41 opportunities. Saquon Barkley is the entire New York Giants team right now. His ceiling is going to be severely capped with how bad this Giants team is. And it's hard to say that he's anything more than a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 at the moment, even though I'm really hoping this changes because I got a lot of money on Barkley. Now, going over to our next back, Brian Robinson. With Robinson, I think he officially falls into what we said last week, the not-startable range. Very tough matchup against Philly. Gibson plays more snaps. Brian Robinson just not really getting involved as a receiver. And you kind of begin to see what this Brian Robinson workload leads to if he does not score a touchdown. So with Robinson, going to be super brief. I think that he will be that low-end RB2, high-end RB3. I know we had him on here last week. We had him as that sell high guy. Honestly, I don't even know why we're wasting your time talking about him here. Now, let's go over to the Pittsburgh backfield. These guys are going to be playing on Thursday. Let me pull up their game logs. And as I do this, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy. And if you want to tell me on our favorite pick'em for tonight over there on Underdog, we're going to go with Jahmyr Gibbs for fewer than 100.5 total yards. I love the matchup, love the spot. That's just too high of a projection for me. And if you use promo code FLOCK with that link in the comment section or description, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. Plus, you'll get our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers and a Jared Goff special pick of more than less than half a total yard and an Amon-Ra St. Brown special pick of more than less than half a total yard as well. So make sure you are taking advantage. But looking at this Pittsburgh Steelers backfield, what I had been previously saying is I was saying, okay, these are handcuffed running backs. These are guys that if you were to see an injury to the other player, then they're startable, right? You roster Najee because if Warren goes down, then Najee looks like he's an RB1. You roster Warren because if Najee goes down, Warren looks like he's an RB1. However, if you look into the actual numbers of this, can we say that's true? Probably not, right? As I mean, if we're looking at the total yards that you had from Najee Harris today, Najee Harris gives you 55 yards. We go over to what you get from Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren gives you 38. Obviously, it's not like they would see literally 100% of the backfield. They'd probably go from seeing about 50%, more so closer to 75% of this Pittsburgh workload. So that 75% of this kind of production really doesn't move the needle at all. Now, every once in a while, you'll get a touchdown. And sure, obviously, if you were to collapse these touchdowns into one player, you would think on the surface it's intriguing. However, if you look at the underlying numbers, we have had a combined 2 touchdowns for these Pittsburgh Steelers running backs. So now we already knew that they were not startable even when you had the other player healthy in their respective offense. Now, I'm beginning to think that even if Najee were to go down, Jaylen Warren probably isn't that high-end RB2, low-end RB1. Jaylen Warren's probably more so running back 18, that mid to low-end RB2, maybe falling into like a Jerome Ford type situation in Cleveland where, yeah, you take the step up, but in reality, you're probably going to be sharing a backfield with another guy. You're maybe not talented enough to actually go out there and get that 75 to 80% backfield split. And even if you are, you're probably not going to be efficient enough to do anything with it. Now, I do want to keep tabs on Aaron Jones, Christian Watson. With Aaron Jones, he played 50% of the snaps, still not startable. Christian Watson sees the majority of targets in this wide receiver room, does really nothing with them. He has 8 targets, 3 receptions, 33 receiving yards. I will say maybe we start Watson as like a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 this week, just given the matchup he has against Los Angeles and what CeeDee Lamb just did to this team. In reality, it would be very difficult to get excited about any of these guys. Now, Olave will be a wide receiver that I may end up including on our buy low videos, so just make sure you are subscribed. Because Olave gives you another week where he has pretty much nothing. But ultimately, Olave has 77 targets in 8 games played. While he's been very inefficient, while he only has 1 receiving touchdown on those 77 targets, so it is extremely frustrating. Ultimately, a talented year 2 wide receiver that has all the pedigree in the world, that was a great rookie, that is averaging almost 10 targets per game. I understand a lot of people will probably want to panic on Olave. I think I'm honestly going to double down and say, hell, if he's going to continue to average 10 targets per game, I'm probably buying. Because keep in mind, this is 10 targets per game with him seeing those injured games against Tampa and New England, right? If you take out those games, I mean, he's at 12 targets per game at this point. Now, going over to Houston, Nico Collins was a wide receiver I was viewing as a must-start wide receiver before this. And now at this point, we at least have to bring up the target volume and how it's consistently decreasing. Through the first month of the season, you are looking at Nico Collins with 11 targets, 9 targets, 3 targets, 9 targets. Over the past 3 weeks, he's had 14 total. So despite us thinking Collins was going to crush in a great matchup against Carolina, despite us thinking he had the consistent target volume plus good quarterback play, I mean, now the volume doesn't look like it's really there. And at the same time, the quarterback play hasn't matched. Now, we'll go over to Tank Dell. Kind of say the same thing, right? Tank Dell, through the first 3 weeks, was sitting here at 21 targets. He was averaging 7 targets a game. And over the past 3 weeks, now keep in mind, he did leave a game early with a concussion, but still, nonetheless, he is currently sitting with a whopping 11 targets. I think Tank Dell's probably not startable for the time being. However, if you're going to go on the other end of the spectrum, and if instead we're going to look at Nico Collins, I think that Collins is still someone that you can start, but more so as that high-end wide receiver 3 rather than someone that's locked in. So kind of what you thought coming into the season. Now, Miles Sanders will be someone I have to talk about for just 1 second. And I think we can officially cut Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders practiced in full all week this week. However, Miles Sanders gives you 2 carries for 0 rushing yards, 0 targets out of the backfield, and Chuba Hubbard is now the starting running back. If you look at the efficiency of Miles Sanders, this is understandable. I'm not going to blame the Carolina Panthers coaching staff and just completely benching Sanders. And I have Miles Sanders on a decent amount of teams. Miles Sanders averaged 3.0 yards per carry so far this season. Miles Sanders has gone out there and he's had 81 receiving yards off of 24 targets. So the thing is, even if Chuba Hubbard were to get injured and then all of a sudden Miles Sanders were to be the starting running back, if that were to even happen, then we're still probably not starting him with how bad this efficiency is and with this offense. Now, going over to Baltimore, I understand Zay Flowers hasn't been great over the past few weeks. Zay Flowers gives you 19 receiving yards this week. This is natural wide receiver volatility. Don't panic. Flowers did lead the team in targets. He had 7. I understand when Gus Edwards has 3 rushing touchdowns. Probably not going to be getting much from Zay Flowers here. But ultimately, we're not expecting to have that kind of efficiency and that kind of just usage for Gus Edwards going forward. I think he does swing back over to the passing game soon. And I'm still completely fine with Flowers. Now, I want to be very hesitant in what we say with the Los Angeles Rams, guys. Because a lot is still up in the air. Unlike the Kirk Cousins situation, we don't know right now the extent of this Matthew Stafford injury. Now, from the research that I'm doing, it looks like that there are 2 possibilities. One, that this is a tear. And if it is a tear, then that means Matthew Stafford will most likely be missing about 6 weeks. However, if it is a sprain, given what Matthew Stafford has played through historically through his NFL career, he could play this week. Now, right now, the Packers are actually betting favorites over the Los Angeles Rams at this point. It's only a 2, 2.5, 1.5 point spread, depending on where you're looking. I don't necessarily think that we have too much information on this because honestly, if the starting quarterback was Brett Rippon, who this week had a whopping 42 passing yards off of 10 attempts, I would assume that the Packers maybe would be favored by even a little bit more. But if Stafford were to miss, then at that point, I think that we are going to be moving what we had, Kupp as a mid wide receiver 1, Puka as that low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. I think instead Kupp will fall to be a high end wide receiver 2 and Puka probably a low end wide receiver 2 in games where we have no Matthew Stafford. The other concern that we possibly have is if this injury is going to hold out Stafford, say 6 weeks. And we're going to hypothetical role. We don't know right now. Matthew Stafford could play this week. But if that were to occur, you have the Rams sitting at 3-5. Say Matthew Stafford misses 5 weeks. They go 1-4 during that time period, and now they're 4-9. Is Matthew Stafford incentivized to come back? A quarterback that people were speculating that he may retire last offseason. Obviously, that did not happen, but still. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, this player that's about to turn 36, he has a Super Bowl ring. He came into the NFL at an unbelievably young age. I mean, at this point, you're looking at Matthew Stafford. I mean, coming in 2009, playing 12 seasons in Detroit, 3 seasons in Los Angeles. I don't think it'd be the most surprising thing ever. Not saying it's going to happen, just saying it's a possibility that if this is a tear, we may not see Stafford back in, and these wide receivers, you still start them, but you just have to dramatically lower expectations. Now, I think that's all we have for you in this video. If you have not done so already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And like I said, if you want to tell me on that Jahmyr Gibbs fewer than 100.5 total yards pick him on Underdog, you can find that link in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, going to get a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and a Jared Goff special pick of more than less than half a total yard, and a Flock exclusive special pick of more than less than half a total yard for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you in the live stream later tonight.